Hey students, I want to pose a question and try to answer it for you in the space of just a few minutes. And the question is, what are the ways in which the intelligence establishment influences and informs a president's national security decision-making? Well, here's my first response. Those who have studied this question are not at all sure that most of the most significant decisions of foreign policy, defense policy over, say, the last 75 years have been significantly influenced or affected by the intelligence products that were made available to presidents and their top advisors. In other words, scholars have gone back in time, looked at key decisions that were made, and looked for the evidence of influence or lack of influence in terms of what the intelligence agencies have made available in written products and in spoken messages that intelligence leaders give to presidents. And an awful lot of the time, they don't find much evidence of the intelligence products mattering a whole lot. So that's astonishing, right? I mean, we've had the CIA since 1947, a whole lot of other agencies, some of which actually predate the CIA, and we spend billions of dollars on intelligence. So if the intelligence products, at least a lot of the time, don't matter much, it's a kind of a surprising and sort of deflating thing to find. So it's worth thinking about before I answer that question of the ways in which these products might matter. It's worth thinking about, well, why might they not matter very much? And a lot of it has to do with a lack of presidential attentiveness, which can occur or exist for a number of reasons. First of all, there can be a lack of trust, a lack of respect that a president has, for the most part, toward CIA especially. The truth is, presidents don't think very much about those other intelligence agencies. I may have told you before, but both presidents, Kennedy and Nixon, were caught on tape. You know, they secretly recorded a lot of conversations. They were both caught on tape, and they were talking about, I think, DIA. Kennedy actually created DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, but they both said something, and this is a pretty close paraphrase. They said to some advisor, they said, DIA, which one is that one? What do they do? So anyway, but the real problem, I'll go back mainly to speaking of CIA. A lot of times presidents don't have much respect or trust for the CIA. You know, presidents and their advisors often think that they know as much or actually more than a bunch of analysts sitting over there at the CIA. I mean, think about it. Why would a Secretary of State, why would a Secretary of Defense, a chairman of the Joint Chiefs, or a National Security Advisor, or for that matter, a president, why would they think that their judgment, their knowledge, would be inferior to analysts at CIA? I'm not saying that the presidents are right, or these other people, these advisors to presidents are right, but it's sort of understandable that they may think that. And the uncomfortable fact is sometimes those skeptical presidents are right. Eisenhower paid attention to intelligence products, but he was convinced that he knew better than CIA when it came to the so-called bomber gap and then the so-called missile gap, these widespread beliefs that the Soviet Union was ahead of the U.S. in terms of long-range bombers, and then that the Soviets were ahead of the U.S. in terms of the number of missiles they had that could strike the U.S. versus missiles that we had that could strike the USSR. And Eisenhower was right, and a lot of the analysts were wrong. So there is that. Sometimes there's a lack of presidential respect. And I said also for a variety of reasons. Another one can be presidents are busy. They're very often tired. presidents have an awful lot of reading that they are supposed to do. A lot of them just don't do all of that reading. So there are reasons why. And in light of this sort of finding that many scholars have made of the lack of impact of intelligence products, a few years ago in a graduate seminar on U.S. intelligence, I assigned students to pick a significant foreign policy decision made by a president and then look for the impact or lack of impact of intelligence products, things like NIEs and PDBs, or meetings that intelligence leaders like a DCI had with the president. So a student was supposed to do a paper about the impact or lack of impact. What I discovered is that this paper project, this research project, made a number, I think a majority of the students uncomfortable. Because when they did their research, they couldn't find evidence of impact of the intelligence leaders or intelligence products. And that made them think they must be doing something wrong. And I said, look, if that is what you find, that is what you find. You need to do in-depth research, but don't assume you're going to find significant impact. You may not. Okay, still, nonetheless, it is worth my trying to answer this question for you. What are the ways in which the intelligence establishment influences or informs a president's national security decision-making? So, number one, there are the written products, the national intelligence estimates, the president's daily brief. And as I think you know, the intelligence establishment produces a lot of other written memoranda and analyses and estimates, some of which may go across the president's desk. Presidents may read some of these. Most presidents don't read NIEs because NIEs are scores of pages long. Most presidents pay some attention to the president's daily brief. Most of them read at least part of it. Some of them read pretty much all of it. Many of them, I'd say a majority, have questions in response to what they see there, and then they ask their briefers to answer their questions, or they send the questions in written form back to CIA or wherever to get answers to the question, to the president's question about what was in the PDB. So the written products might have an impact. Sometimes they have impacts that the intelligence establishment did not want. In 2007, a national intelligence estimate said that Iran had substantially set aside its pursuit of building nuclear warheads to become a nuclear warfighting power. There was active derision and hostility against that NIE and the intelligence community for having produced such a product. But many presidents are more or less interested in the written product, so they can have some impact. And then there's the spoken summaries, the conversations that intelligence leaders have with presidents. So DCIs, DNIs, in modern times, directors of CIA. That depends, though, on the relationship between the president and his intelligence leaders. So let me remind you of some history. Kennedy thought that his second DCI, John McCone, was too partisan, too aggressive, not loyal enough. Kennedy was caught on tape saying that John McCone was stupid, a horse's ass, a bastard. So there wasn't much relationship there. Now, Kennedy gave McCone access, so McCone did get to tell the president what he thought in terms of what the intelligence agencies were coming up with, plus McCone's own personal views on things. So, but let's take other presidents. Nixon, not really interested in what DCI Richard Helms thought. Not interested. Clinton, Bill Clinton, his first DCI was a man named James Woolsey. He almost never got in to see the president. You might not know this history, but there was a man with some sort of violent tendencies, mental illness, a very troubled man. He got into a private aircraft and tried to fly it right into the White House. I think he wanted to kill President Clinton. Well, I mean, it was a small aircraft. It sort of landed on the bushes adjacent to the White House. It may have sort of done minor damage to the building. It never came close to harming President Clinton. I don't think he was in the White House at that moment. Well, anyway, for months thereafter, Woolsey would say to friends, "You remember that plane that someone flew into the White House? That was me trying to get an audience with President Clinton." So Clinton just wasn't interested. There's no evidence that President Trump is much interested in what the intelligence establishment thinks. Having said that, I wouldn't be shocked if he has some interest, in what Gina Haspel, the director of the CIA, thinks. The Bushes, the first President Bush, having been a DCI, was very interested in both the written products and in what his DCIs had to say. Reagan was interested in what Casey had to say, and I think Reagan was interested in the intelligence products. Johnson, with Helms, he was interested in what Helms had to say. He respected Helms. He didn't always like the written products, and they annoyed and angered him, but he read them. So it varies. The intelligence leaders become, in effect, salespeople. They want to sell the president on the idea of paying attention to what the written products say, but also paying attention to what they have to say to the president. Sometimes they do a successful sales job, sometimes not. There's a related matter, which is sometimes intelligence leaders want to promote their own views of things to the president, and they may contrast with what the written products say. So in some cases, John McCone did that with President Kennedy and President Johnson. And it is said that William Casey sometimes disparaged the written products and expressed his own contrasting views of things going on around the world. So there's one more way that the intelligence products and leaders might matter. They may influence, even if they don't directly influence the president's awareness and thinking, they may influence the thinking and the knowledge of the people who surround the president. They typically receive, most of them at least, the PDBs. They have access to the NIEs. They talk to the head of CIA, to the DNI, those people. And so they may be influenced by products of the intelligence establishment and in turn sort of take that knowledge and use it in speaking with the president. But in conclusion, it's not at all a sure thing that intelligence products matter as much as we may think they should in enlightening the president before big decisions are made. It's not a very satisfying thought, is it?